Good morning, my name is Kyle Quintana, and this is my presentation where I examine the effect of music on a teenager's attention with a focus on controlling for variability. A lot of people like to listen to music while they're working. From common experience alone, we understand intuitively the effect that music has in our environment, turning the most mundane of situations into something much more exciting. On the drive over to school, when we're working at the gym or doing homework at our desks, people use this effect of music at pretty much every opportunity to turn monotony into excitement. This effect, coupled with the growing access to music listening driven by new technologies like streaming services, makes music one of the most accessible mediums out there today. And as such, it's no wonder why scientists have deemed it so important that we research new ways that we can use music as a tool to improve our daily lives. As a student who was always listening to music when I'm doing light studying or some homework, I was especially interested in investigating if there was any cognitive benefit to listening to music. More specifically, I wanted to figure out if listening to music would help or decrease my attention-keeping capabilities. And it's not just me to whom this applies to. Plenty of other people listen to music for a variety of tasks. And if we only knew definitively how music affects our ability to focus on these tasks, then we would be able to recommend between cutting back or using music as a tool to improve our attention on whatever task it is we're doing. And that's why I created this study, to answer the question, how does music benefit/harm a teenage student's capability to pay attention? With that out of the way, let's look at the literature surrounding one of cognitive musicology's most well-known hypotheses, known as the Mozart effect. Now, the Mozart effect claims that people tend to perform better at spatial tasks after listening to music composed by Amadeus Mozart. And while the media has extensively popularized it as purportedly true, scientists have had trouble affirming this hypothesis for years now. Some find that the Mozart effect is real and exclusive to music from Mozart. Others find that the phenomenon has less to do with Mozart's music and it's just a real cognitive effect of music as a whole. And still other studies report difficulties in replicating the effect at all, even after trying to reproduce this original study as closely as possible. Clearly, there is a replication problem going on here, but it's not as if the whole hypothesis is entirely untrue. If this were the case, very few scientists, if any, would be able to reproduce the original study, so it's very odd in this case that some laboratories are able to reproduce the original study's findings while others simply can't. So why is this the case? And an even better question, why does this seem to be happening so often with human subjects, but not in animal subjects? When Frances H. Rosher, the leading scientist behind the original Mozart effect paper, decided to double down on her hypothesis, she conducted the same study as before, but this time on a set of lab rats. When the results pointed to the Mozart effect's existence in lab rats too, there is of course some skepticism to be had within the community. And so many people tried their hand at reproducing the original study, most of them expecting the same as before, inconclusive results. But a weird thing happened. This time, the results of these subsequent studies largely supported Rosher's rat hypothesis, and even more studies that have occurred since then have found much the same. So why does the expert consensus for the Mozart effect's existence switch from a hesitant no in humans to a relatively consistent yes in rats? This study hypothesizes it to be the result of variability. After all, while we look completely different, rats and humans have remarkably similar regions of the brain, and if the consensus around Rosher's rat study is to be believed, then we also have similar music processing systems too. The only difference then is how much you can control a human compared to how much you can control a rat. It should go without saying that each human is unique with their own sentiments and values that would affect how they respond and perceive a song. And frankly, there are simply way more variables that require identification and control when you do a human study compared to when you do that same study with rats. This fact is why, even outside of rats, hypotheses in cognitive musicology are much more consistent when the research subjects are animals instead of humans. With all that said, if this study was to attempt to avoid the same error of uncertainty that plagues studies like the Mozart effect, then it would have to identify and control the variables found to have the most effect on how the humans experience and respond to music. And after a thorough review of the literature, the following three variables were identified as being most prominent in doing just that: mood, familiarity, and arousal. Arousal, defined as an emotional response triggered by music, significantly influences cognition and behavior. As it shows, it greatly intertwines with how we think and act. It has also been shown to be connected to the unconscious effects of music on human behavior, such as altering the speed at which we shop and consume even alcoholic drinks. This connection between music-induced arousal and behavior shows just how impactful arousal is to the way humans respond to music, making it an important variable that we have to pay attention to within this study. Mood, which is the emotional effect of a song, plays a key role in the music-induced arousal process, which, as we just discussed, affects how we respond to a song. Research by Lightman showed that the mood of a song can bias our perceptions of our surroundings. Further, the studies on musical mood induction by Etzel and Westphal revealed a wide range of moods that music can evoke, from more common ones like happiness and sadness to more niche ones like fear even. Emphasizing this importance of controlling mood in the study is a very important thing to pay attention to. Familiarity with a piece of music also plays a crucial role in influencing how we respond to it. Research by Pierre et al. Demonstrated that being familiar with a song significantly increases one's arousal levels. This concept is further expanded upon by a study from Gaunzer and Huda, which showed that music perceived as annoying but familiar would increase donations more so than music with a pro-social connotation that just wasn't as familiar to people. These findings connecting arousal, behavior, and familiarity prove that all these variables are important to control within the study. So at its core, my study's design was pretty simple. I got a group of 25 students from an all-boys Jesuit school in Arizona and had them complete a couple of tasks commonly used to test for attention within the cognitive musicology field. These were the load-induced blindness task and the task switching task. These tasks would each be completed one time in silence and another time with music playing through a set of headphones. Since the tests were fully digital, all the data was immediately downloaded to the participant's computer and then would be sent to me via Gmail so that I could analyze it. The real complexity came from how I was going to attempt to minimize the variability within the study. With the three variables we just mentioned in mind, I was going to have to make sure that arousal, mood, and familiarity were present in every single trial and every single step of my methodology. And that's where the idea for a Dublin playlist model stemmed from. Piggybacking off a similar study on how music impacts our ability to drive and our attention while doing so, this open playlist method was the best way I found to ensure that the three variables identified earlier would be present at each step of the study. And suffice to say for time, all of the participants really had to do was listen to my instructions, and then the three variables were almost guaranteed to be present. Now, granted, it isn't unheard of for teenage boys to not follow directions, and so I added a short questionnaire at the end of the survey to ensure that these three variables were in fact present. This Google form consisted of 3 Likert scale questions on a scale of 1 to 5 that you now see on the board. And if any response received a score of 2 or less, their data set was thrown out completely, as it can be assumed that the three variables were present for either one of the questions. There was also another question included in the questionnaire, which was there to measure how hard participants thought each task was relative to each other, but the relevancy of this question will pop up later in our discussion. With that out of the way, let's get to the results. In the end, I ended up getting 25 participants for the study, but the data from 2 of them had to be thrown out since the end of Likert scale survey, indicated that the 3 variables were present within their trials and would have adulterated the data. Speaking of the end of study survey, participants also they almost unanimously decided or voted that the load blindness task was much more difficult than a task switching task. As for the data I got back from the attention tasks, the table on the screen shows the results from the 2 t-tests I ran performed using R. And each variable indicates something important about my final results. Starting with the task switching component, let's examine the t-value, which helps us understand the difference between the data set garnered from the trial with music and the data from the trial without music. Interestingly, the t-value here is quite small, hinting at a minimal difference between these 2 groups. Then I looked at the p-value, which is an indicator of statistical significance, and this, higher than conventional p-value threshold, which is conventionally 0.05, led me to conclude that the presence of music doesn't have a significant impact on performance. This is further supported by the 95% confidence interval, which included 0 within its range, as well as the mean difference score, both of which indicated an insignificant decrease in scores for the task switching task when music was being played. Now let's contrast this with the findings for the load blindness component, where the results shifted dramatically. Instantaneously, we see the t-value has gained much in magnitude and is much more substantial, indicating a very negative correlation between the data garnered with music and the data gotten without. The p-value is also way below the conventional value for the p-value, which as we just mentioned was 0.05, indicating statistical significance. This is supported by the confidence interval, which no longer contains 0 within its range, and a mean difference score of negative 11%. With all that data in mind, there's little doubt that a significant negative correlation between music and performance in the load blindness task was present, unlike with task switching. It should be noted, however, that there was a lot of variability in how each participant performed. This was particularly evident when analyzing the percent improved scores, which you can see you see the calculation for on the board. This measured the difference in performance between the 2 trials for each task. When this data is visualized on the column chart, this variability is immediately apparent. For the load blindness task, the responses varied significantly. One participant's score would improve by as much as 37% with music, while another's decreased by as much as negative 15%. Many participants only showed a slight increase or decrease of less than 15%, and some observed no change at all with music. These same wild ranges also apply to the task switching task, but they are at a less significant magnitude. Further analysis revealed an interesting pattern between this information too. Participants whose scores decreased in the task switch task often experienced a similar decline in the load blindness task, with the addition of music. But those who showed a significant improvement in the load blindness task with music did not necessarily see this improvement with music carried over to the task switching task. In some instances, their performance remained the same or even worsened. Okay, so what does all that really mean? Overall, the study suggests that the impact of music on attention varies significantly depending on the difficulty of the task. Tasks requiring a minimal amount of concentration, like the task switching task, which was found to be less difficult overall, may not be greatly affected by music, whereas the tasks demanding significant focus, like the load blindness task, which was rated to be the most difficult, causes the impacts of music to be much more pronounced and lead to a negative effect on attention. Interestingly, these hypotheses have been mentioned before in previous literature, but have up until now remained unconnected. Additionally, while my study highlights the potential negative effects of how music affects attention, it's essential to consider the emotional benefits of music that weren't tested by this quantitative study, such as making the task more enjoyable, which would have to be weighed as a trade-off in a real-world situation. As for how the variability between participants' performance ties into all this, the variability can be explained by the fact that some people's attention spans are simply more susceptible to musical stimuli than other people's, making them more affected by music when they're trying to focus. Moving on to the limitations of the study, it's crucial to acknowledge the constraints that impacted the generalizability of the findings. Firstly, the study's population was small and niche, consisting of only 23 in the end, male high school students from a specific demographic. Therefore, my conclusions are not generalizable to a broader demographic. Another significant limitation arose from a methodological oversight regarding the regulation of song lyrics in the methodology. While all participants were told to listen to happy music, I didn't specify whether the songs should or shouldn't have lyrics, and so that influenced the results, as it is a major debate in the literature today as whether lyrics in music affects our ability to pay attention. This oversight restricts the applicability of the study's findings to playlists comprised of both vocal and non-vocal tracks, since I cannot ensure the presence of just one or the other in all trials. Furthermore, despite my best efforts, there was some challenges with the data collection, particularly environmental factors like background noise and distracting ads from non-premium music playing services, and those also could have harmed the performance of participants. To recap, the main purpose of the study was to investigate the effect of background music on the teenage attention span with an emphasis on minimizing human variability. Through the usage of an open playlist method, an open source cognitive battery, and an end-of-study survey, this study on attention was successfully carried out with minimal variability. After careful analysis, this study identified that music does not significantly impact attention in tasks that demand minimal focus, but music does have detrimental impact on tasks that demand more focus. The resistance people have to this detrimental effect of music varies from participant to participant and task to task, and should just be the subject of future research. But for right now, people should just keep listening to music if it doesn't distract them too much, and they should stop listening to music if it does impede with their ability to pay attention. With all that said, thank you for your attention and have a great day.
Thanks, Kyle. Really impressive. I have a couple of questions for you, and then we'll wrap this up. So tell us a little bit about your initial exploration of the scholarly work and how that helped to inform the research question you ended up testing.
Right. So in the beginning, I was actually going to do a study on cognition as a whole, and then while I was looking at the field of cognitive musicology and all the research papers that surround it, I started noticing that a lot of the papers had like really conflicting results to one another. Like as we saw with the Mozart effect, that's not a thing just totally confined to one hypothesis. That's actually a very, I guess, prominent problem that we're having in the cognitive musicology field. So when I was designing my study, I kind of wanted to step away from getting a view on cognition as a whole and seeing the effect of music on it, rather just focus narrowly on attention and see if I could do anything with my methodology, which was controlling for variability, that could, I guess, make an impact on the field as a whole and try and stop this variability, and I guess you could call it a replication crisis that we're currently seeing in the field.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And then how did the limitations of your method or data influence your new understanding? I know you went through limitations pretty extensively, but is your new understanding sort of pulled back a little bit as a result of those limitations?
Right, I definitely think the limitations I mentioned affects it. That's why I also mentioned at the end that there should be future studies that reaffirm this hypothesis and trying to see if I was actually right with saying that controlling these variables would make results more consistent with one another. And so it's not to say I don't have any confidence in my results anymore, but I would definitely want to do a restudy and fix all the issues I just mentioned and to see if there was any actual real substantial effect that my controlling for variability did in the final study.
Fantastic.
And you're speaking about a lot of this in Mr. Nolte's questions, including the limitations of the niche population. But if you could revisit your research process, what would you do differently and why?
Yeah. I just mentioned that I would redo the limitations because I think overall it detracted from the amount that I could count on my study results and be confident in them. So I would definitely change that. There's also like other things I would want to change. Like for example, I only got like 25 participants and then 2 of them had to be cut out, which makes only 23. Really, I would have wanted more to increase again, the amount of confidence I would have in my final results. And I also deciding whether songs should have lyrics, and even there's more debate as to whether things like tempo have an effect on how music affects our response. So I would just do more research into that, and I guess make a more strict set of guidelines that students would have to follow, so that their results could be